Welcome to Sit Around the Fire, the podcast dedicated to the men and women on the front lines, first responders, military personnel, and their families. I'm your host, Ashley Dillard, a retired firefighter paramedic turned full-time mental health professional. My passion is helping the helpers. Together, we'll explore the challenges, the triumphs, and the real stories behind the uniform. In each episode, we'll talk about mental, physical, and spiritual wellness, along with the unique culture that comes along with serving in a high-stress environment. From building strong relationships to navigating the weight of the job, this is a space where we can be real, share experiences, and support one another. Whether you're on the front lines yourself or you're supporting someone who is, this is a podcast to remind you that you are not alone. So grab a seat, pull up to the fire, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation with you today. We are going to dive in and talk about who are you without your titles. We're going to explore how we deeply attach ourselves to external roles that we hold, things like careers or relationships or status or money, and how letting go of these false identities can lead us into living in our authentic selves, but living so much more authentically and intentionally as well. So grab a seat, get ready to roll, and let's dive in. Welcome back. So today we're talking about identity, and we're not talking about what the name on your badge is or the title that you hold, your business card, or even your relationship status. We are talking about your identity, the one that you meet in the silence, the core essence of who your true self really is. And I want to ask you guys a question to reflect on is, who are you when you're not helping? Or who are you when you're not fixing? Who are you when you're not leading or saving or providing? It's the big question of who are you when none of those things exist? Who are you really? And I want to share a little bit of my personal story here when I experienced a major identity shift within my life. And that has come in several different times of my life, but most recently when I officially retired from the fire department and moved into the role of being a full-time mental health professional. So up until that point, I have to say that I was extremely tied to my identity as a firefighter. I had the firefighter plates. I had special firefighter t-shirts and sweatshirts that I would wear. I had the stickers, all of the external things. But what I found to be very interesting is when someone would ask me, what do? I was very quick to let them know I'm a firefighter paramedic. And because the paramedic side of me was so strong, it was really important that I distinguished myself from not just a firefighter, but no, I'm a firefighter paramedic. And looking back and reflecting on this now, I can see like when I was asked that question, I had so much pride in saying that I was a firefighter. And you almost get addicted to the response that you get from people. Oh my gosh, like that's so crazy. Like thank you so much. You're a hero. And I became addicted to hearing that. It validated my experience and what I was doing because people looked at me and they thought so highly of who I was based off of what my badge was, what was on my license plate. It almost gives us this sense of being invincible, that we get that underlying hero mentality within us of we can do anything, and we like that. And so I was very attached to what that role meant for me. So when my life started to take a very different turn and I was being faced with making some difficult decisions in terms of what is the next chapter of life going to look like for me? Am I going to invest another 10 years at the fire department? What am I going to do after having gained more education and moving towards licensure and going into the whole mental health field? And I really had to sit with this idea or the concept that there was no way it was going to be healthy for me to be able to do both things. I wasn't going to be able to work 48-hour shifts along with seeing clients in the mental health practice full time as well. That was a very quick way to burn out for me. And so I needed to make a very specific and reflective decision on what do I want this next season of my life to look like. And that's when I made the decision to move out of being a first responder online to being someone who helps the helpers. And I really struggled more than I thought with this transition and letting go of the identity. It's almost like I felt like I didn't know who I was without having that t-shirt to put on every 4 days, or being around the people, the crews that I had worked with for so long. I didn't even know who am I? Who are my friends? What am I about? It was a very interesting experience to walk through letting go of what had been for so long and moving into a journey of discovery of who am I really, and knowing now and still continuing to discover how whatever work, quote unquote work, that I am doing is just a part of who I am, but it is not my identity. I am not Ashley, the therapist. I'm not Ashley, the retired firefighter. I am who I am. The I am is the greatest aspect and entity of who I am. Everything else is just a costume that I put on my avatar for the day as I go about the journey and the experience. But breaking apart from that identity is incredibly hard when we are sitting in the middle of it. And we really construct our identity based on these external roles. Being a firefighter, being a police officer, being a soldier, being a nurse, being a paramedic, all of those external things. And I think if you really sat and reflected on this, you would realize how this really is true of you. We get very attached to this. That is who we are. And like I mentioned in my story, when someone asked me who I was, that was my first answer to the question. Some of us too identify really deeply with our relationships. So with our parents or a spouse or even another caretaker, is we fill in the blank when someone asks us who we are or what we do or what we're about, is oh, I'm married to this person, or I'm so-and-so's spouse, or I'm in a relationship with this person. These are my parents. And a lot of this false identity that we establish within our relationships, it serves us sometimes at times, but it's also incredibly limiting, because we're not allowing our authentic self to truly shine through and show others around us who we are. The accomplishments, that's probably another huge one for our culture, is how many stripes do we have on our shirt? What's the color of my helmet? What are those special certifications and classes and all kinds of things that we're getting that are those accomplishments that we're wrapping our identity into? We are defining who we are based on what we're accomplishing, which if we look at it, that's incredibly exhausting to live up to that mentality of there's always something more to strive for. There's always something more to achieve. And we're never really content here in the present. It's a trap. It's a really complicated mental trap that we find ourselves in. The financial status is huge for people's identity. It's probably one of the number one things that people tie their identity and status to is finances. Because if I have a lot of money, that means that I'm successful or I'm important or I'm safe or I'm secure or whatever the narrative is that we tell ourselves around money. But we identify with that. Am I rich? Am I poor? Am I fill in the blank? But the trick really is, like, we cannot seek success as another form of validation. That seeking that validation means nothing in terms of what those status You guys, what if I told you that the key to overcoming anything in life starts with one simple question? What's your why? Your mindset shapes your reality. Your thoughts can fuel resilience, or they can truly hold you back. In this brand new series coming up, Mindset to Manifestations, we're diving deep into how you can shift your state, break free of fear and stress, and truly create the life that you want. In our first episode, we're talking about getting to know your why, because Viktor Frankl said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." We'll explore the science behind mindset, the power of thoughts, and how people like Frankl and Dr. Joe Dispenza prove that what we focus on can literally change our lives. So if you're ready to step into a new level of clarity and purpose, join me. New episode drops on Monday. Don't miss it. Subscribe now, follow along, and let's start changing our state together. Things are like. That doesn't define who we are. It's not the real I am. So we're not human doings, we're human beings. It's the essence, the true core of who we are is our authentic self. It's not what our career is or who we are in a relationship with or how much we've achieved or accomplished or what's the dollar amount in the bank. Those are not really a reflection of who we are. Those are all external things. So when we look at that next thing trap, when we're always needing that next promotion or the next paycheck or the next partner, it's a lot of having to do with that dopamine theory, the one where we're always chasing pleasure and status. But the problem here is, you guys, that when we're always chasing pleasure and status, all we're doing is making ourselves feel emptier and emptier. And we can see this play out in real time so often. Is when I have that, BMW or I have that Lamborghini, then I'll finally be happy. Or when I have the Lamborghini and now I have a smoking hot girlfriend, now I'm happy. Or if I have the Lamborghini and the super attractive partner, now I need the giant house to go along with it, or the boat, or the jet ski, or the side-by-side. Whatever it is, those things are those pleasure-seeking things that give us that quick dopamine fix, which we know as first responders, our threshold for that dopamine fix is super high because of everything that we are exposed to and the way that our brain has adapted to stress and trauma. The threshold is incredibly high. So that's why those pleasure-seeking things become more and more and more and more, because the stress and fear response, that feeling of horizonlessness we've spoke to before, is that feeling where nothing is going to feel exciting anymore. And so you're looking for the more expensive thing or the more dangerous behavior, whatever that looks like. But we hit that threshold where we're not going to find it. And that becomes frustrating when we link it back to our identity, because if our identity is wrapped in what we do, what happens when we stop doing it? Like, what happens when suddenly you don't put on the badge anymore, or the uniform, or that relationship has non-existed any longer, or the bank account is now showing negative? What happens when we stop doing? And that's when the role falls away, is really when I think a lot of people hit this space or this place of reflecting on, like, who am I actually? And that crash happens when a role ends. So thinking of, even as simple as retirement. And if you haven't listened to the episode with the Deterros, I highly recommend going back and listening to that to get a real-time story from the two of them when they talk about what happens when suddenly that's no longer there anymore. The role of being a firefighter, being a chief, and having that network of community and people around you is what their experience was like when that all went away. Was incredibly lonely, incredibly isolating, is suddenly that was all gone. So what happens when you retire? What happens when you break up with that person, or you lose your job for some reason? Or even more simply, like, what happens when you're burned out, when you just don't want to do the job anymore? That identity void that we have is when those things go away, when that role completely falls away, and we're left asking ourselves the question of, what are we? Who are we? Who am I? And oftentimes that identity void, we fill it with shame and fear and confusion, because shame comes in and preaches that narrative that I'm not good enough. I wasn't good enough in my relationship, and that's why it ended. Or I don't deserve good things. That's why I lost my job. This always happens to me. Or the burnout side of, I'm just so tired of doing this. I can't do this anymore. But Gabor Mate has a really excellent quote that I think puts a very unique light on all of this. And he asks this through his quote: "The question is never why the addiction, but why the pain?" And this really is an invitation, not a crisis, but it gives the birth of the authentic self a chance to happen. That journey to exploring, like, who are we really? Like, who are we outside of the job? Who are we outside of being a parent? Who are we outside of the things that we have? But we can really look in terms and see, who are we? Who is the I am? When we discover the real you, holy moly, there's so much freedom in this, which is so exciting and so cool, that when we strip away all the titles, it might feel very dysregulating and hard at first. You might not know what is what and who is this person in the mirror. But when we start to use some reflection on who we are, and we get quiet and we listen, is when we start to discover, holy wow, there is so much to who I am outside of what I maybe have thought for a very long time, outside of the old narratives that I've been telling myself before I even put the uniform on. And we could ask those questions like, what am I without my job? What do I value outside of achievement? Where do I feel peace, not pressure? And even off duty, you matter. You make a difference. Even when you're not saving lives and you don't show up in the fire truck or the police car, you are worthy. You are more than the badge. You are more than the uniform. You are more than the relationship or the money or the achievements. We have to think about reconstructing the identity that we have now. And as you do the work and you start to really dig into this concept of the I am, everything becomes dismantled. And we reflect on and think about, how do we integrate purpose beyond the roles that we have? So we know that we probably still have to go to work. We're going to still have to function in relationships and manage money and all those things. But how do we have those things present in our life, but yet not attach onto them as if they're part of our identity? And that's where I always use a metaphor, put it into words, of putting on the costume of the avatar. So I think about who my authentic self is. And I know that when I'm going to quote unquote work and I'm going to see people in the practice, is I'm putting on that therapist costume, that holding that role, playing that character of being a therapist. You can do the same thing for yourself when you're thinking about going to work and doing the job. Is you're putting on the costume, literally, like they have Halloween costumes made after our uniforms, which is actually hilarious. But you're putting on that costume, you're going to serve your purpose, you're going to do your work. And then at the end of the day, you're taking that costume off and you're hanging it back in the closet, and you will come back to it when it's necessary. But you're not going to choose to wear it all the time. Even in my own place and time where I am now, even though I'm not online as a firefighter, I still have to take the costume off. I cannot be Ashley, the therapist, 24/7, 365, because that's not who I am. It is an art that you learn to develop with yourself, where you start to be very cognizant and intentional about taking off these identities and leaving them where they need to. That we need to separate ourselves from the situation. So realizing it's almost that like watching the movie mentality, is knowing that I'm not this is not who I am. This experience, this is not who I am. This identity is not who I am. But I know like who I actually am at my core. And there's a lot of really helpful tools and ways to be able to do this, because it's very new and it's going to feel very fumbly at first as you're navigating this and figuring this out. But things like journaling is awesome. Therapy, of course, like having somebody help you walk through this process of deconstructing old identities is huge. Meditation, even if it's something that you're starting just for 5 minutes in the morning or 5 minutes in the evening, but taking time to settle the mind and reflect inward, reflecting on that I am. And then whatever other spiritual practices you want to participate in, or what are beneficial to you, but knowing that it is an art, but being excited about the process, like being excited and getting to know who this authentic self is. If you think about it, like when you have a new friendship or a new relationship, it's so exciting at the beginning because you're asking so many questions and you're spending time together, getting to know who this person is. It's the same mentality that we take when we are getting to know who our authentic self is you have to put intention and investment into it. You have to be willing to let go of the false identities that you may have been holding on to for a very long time. So what I want you to do after kind of listening and reflecting upon this is to write down and think of, who am I becoming? Not who I was or who people want me to be, but who am I becoming? And this week, I want you to notice when you're introducing yourself by what you do, and pause. I want you to really pay attention to how subconsciously you've tied yourself in and held on to these identities of who you are. And it becomes such second nature to fill in the blank when someone asks. But I want you to pay attention to really, really notice about when that's happening. And then I want you to work to do something about it. So as you start to deconstruct these old identities, these old narratives about who you are or what you do, then you become who you actually shine as your authentic self. I want to end with a really powerful quote that I think brings everything entirely back together. And it's from Lao Tzu, and he says, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." And that's what I really encourage you to do this week, moving forward, every day, moment by moment, is to let go of what you are and think about what you might be in terms of that authentic self and who the real I am truly is. It's been so awesome being here with you again today. I look forward to seeing you again so soon around the fire. Go out and be the I am. Thanks for joining us around the fire today. We appreciate you taking the time to listen, and I hope that you found value in our conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and share it with your community. Remember, we'll be sitting around the fire again soon, so keep an eye out for more episodes where we continue to explore the stories and insights of first responders. Until next time, stay safe and keep the fire burning.